third session of the webinar series by the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation. We call it CEGRAD of the University of Cape Coast. And for this afternoon, we'll be looking at navigating the academia as female scholars. My name is Akosia Chiabiasaki, and it's such a pleasure to be your moderator again for this afternoon. I look forward to a very interesting session with our speakers. Before I get into the details for today's discussion, I want to run by you how this program is going to go. I'll first allow the director for the center to welcome all of us, and then we'll be taking a brief message from the Vice Dean for the Department of Social Sciences, I beg your pardon, and then I would introduce our speakers, and then from there we'll dig in. We'll be looking at navigating the academia as female scholars. And for our director for the center, Dr. Georgina Yaudro, she is a senior lecturer with the Department of Sociology and Anthropology here at the University of Cape Coast. So if, Doc, you're ready, I would let you in, and then you'd quickly welcome us, and then we'd move on to the others on our agenda.
Thank you very much, Akosia, as usual. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are located. We are really happy to see you, and you are welcome to our third webinar series. It's something that the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation of the University of Cape Coast started not long ago. The first edition was held in September, where we look at key issues in gender research. Last month, we looked at gender and emotional intelligence, and this month we are looking at the experiences of females in the academy or in academia, and then what we can learn from them as young, up-and-coming scholars. We are happy to have our Vice Dean from the Faculty of Social Sciences here with us this afternoon. Last month we had the Provost. We really appreciate his time and presence with us. We are happy to have 3 scholars from 3 different universities. From our home university at the University of Cape Coast, we're happy to have Professor Abigail Opoku-mensah. We are happy to have Professor Rose Boxwell from the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, and Dr. Kiskena, whom in the Ghanaian context we'll call Professor Kiskena because she's associate professor, but different countries and contexts have different experiences, and we'll be learning about it this afternoon. So this afternoon we are looking at the experiences of female academics. We've known that research shows that the world over, fewer women than men occupy top-level positions across many institutions and practices, including, in our case, university institutions. Research also shows that universities are male-dominated institutions. We do appreciate that universities started at different periods. In the UK, for example, we've had very old institutions like Oxford and Cambridge, which are over 800 years ago. How different are experiences of women in such very historical institutions from very current universities, for example? So we'll be listening to that. By design, sometimes through culture, patriarchy, and others, women are difficult, or it's difficult for women to get to the glass ceiling. What exactly is this glass ceiling? And the few women who have managed to reach there, someone told me that I'm not yet there. No, she's done so much, so we would want to learn from their experiences. We do also know from Caroline Moses' gender role framework that there are 3 key areas that tend to dominate women's attention, but also that of men. We know that the reproductive roles, the culture, community roles, and then the productive roles all fight for our attention. In the midst of navigating these roles, how do we still manage to climb in the academy? This is of interest to us. And in this discussion, I want to draw attention to a discourse that happened not long ago, just I think on Sunday, on the platform of lecturers of the University of Cape Coast when we floated our advert. There were some who said, why the experiences of female academics and not the experiences of male academics? How different are the experiences of female academics from male academics? I was like, don't worry, we are happy to listen to your experiences, but people feel very uncomfortable sometimes with some of these discussions. It's all about opportunity to learn from those who have gone through. What is it? What can we learn? It's also a platform for emerging scholars to learn from them as we navigate. And we always say that this series is also about collaboration between different institutions. This afternoon, for example, we have 3 different institutions. What are the differences, if any, between these institutions in terms of the experiences of women? What are the similarities? How do they really compare? It's also of interest to us. We also do appreciate that there are disciplinary differences that makes the experiences of some women in particular disciplines different from others. When we pick the domain of science, women in science, for example, is still a masculine subject, and for that matter, there are very few women in there. What about the arts? Is it so easy? In the Ghanaian context, statistics from the National Council for Tertiary Education says that we are about 35–65% in terms of faculty representation, meaning we have about 65% males, that's against 35% women throughout. But we do have institutional differences as well. How is the situation like in South Africa, for example? What about the UK? Is something we're going to learn about this afternoon. We also do appreciate that there may be some support systems in some institutions which might not be available in other institutions. How is it like in different institutions? These are some of the things we intend to learn about this afternoon. On this note, I don't want to bore you with long speech, but I want to welcome all of you, especially our 3 speakers. We can't end without talking to our participants. Without you, this program will not happen. We really appreciate your presence, the fact that you are always with us and you are ready to learn with us. We also appreciate the work of our administrative staff, our research fellows in the center. They are behind the scenes, but they push through and see to it that this thing happens. We really appreciate their role. We welcome our 3 speakers, and we hope to have an engaging and interesting engagement from them this afternoon. Thank you very much, and welcome to the 3rd webinar series of the Center for Gender Research, where we navigate the experiences of female scholars in the academia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. We're grateful for your brief welcoming address. I will go to the Vice Dean for the Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor Augustine Tanley, and he would equally briefly give a few words. Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity, and good afternoon, evening, good morning, depending on where you are at this time of the day. In our case,
Prof, would love to see you. If you could adjust your camera a bit.
Oh, that would be a challenge.
Oh, that's fine. Then please go ahead.
Okay. So we, as a faculty, we are happy to be part of this afternoon's program coordinated by CEGRAD. The Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation, established by the university and under the Faculty of Social Sciences, is an indication of how gender issues are sensitive to the university. The activities of the center also reflect the university and the faculty strategic plan. And for that matter, we are so excited anytime we become part of activities run by the center. These activities nonetheless bring about the visibility of the university and also the internationalization of the university as a community. As indicated by the director, these speakers have been drawn across the global community, so that the topic this afternoon, which is about navigating the academia as a female scholars. So we are going to listen to scholars across various jurisdictions. The experiences naturally are not the same. Policies and support system, as mentioned by the director, are not the same. So we are excited that at this time, we have such relevant topic to discuss and to share the experiences. And as we all know, the number of female in academia is increasing globally. So then it means academic environments will now be more sensitive to female members of the academic community. Particularly, we know they combine productive and reproductive activities. So how do they navigate, as we will listen to the seasoned speakers this afternoon? So the issue of time becomes paramount here. How do they combine their academic work with their reproductive work? Are there policies in place to support them to rise up like their male counterpart who do not have issues to combine, particularly the issues of reproductive? By this, we're not saying that males do not help their female counterpart in issues of reproduction, but we are saying that the burden, greater part of the burden, are on our female colleagues, and they combine this with their academic work. So we once again, we are excited to be part of this program as a faculty, and the faculty is always prepared to support the Center for AIDS activities. So we are very grateful to the opportunity, and that is all that I can say now on behalf of the faculty. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Professor Augustine Tanley. He is the Vice Dean for the Faculty of Social Sciences. Now, he's a Professor of Migration and Refugee Studies at the Department of Population and Health here at the University of Cape Coast, and his research interests are in migration, livelihood, and development. He has also researched gender and migration, refugee studies, among others, and he is Professor Augustine Tanley, the Vice Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, UCC. So at this point, I guess I have the singular honor of introducing our speakers for this afternoon, and I'm going to start with Professor Rose Boswell. Now, she is an anthropologist and poet. She is a professor of ocean cultures and heritage with the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. She is also a DSI NRF South African researcher in ocean cultures and heritage. She is author of Le Malese Creole, Ethnic Identity in Mauritius, Representing Heritage in Zanzibar and Madagascar, Challenges to Identifying and Managing Intangible Cultural Heritage, among others. She has also authored several papers on heritage management, cultural identity, and sensory ethnography. Could you kindly give me a wave, Prof? And you're so much welcome to this afternoon session. Thank you for joining us. I'm quickly going to introduce my second speaker, Professor Abigail Opoku-Mensah. She holds a PhD in psychology with specialization in industrial and organizational psychology from University of Ghana. She is an associate professor and a former head of management department, School of Business here at UCC. She's currently the board chair of the University of Cape Coast Basic School Governing Committee, and also the hall warden of the only female hall of residence here at UCC, and that's Adishi Hall. She has over 10 years of experience in teaching and academic research. Her areas of research interest include workplace diversity and knowledge management, work-family conflict, employees' work attitudes, organizational design, and social issues in management. She has over 20 publications and has presented numerous academic papers and conferences in a number of countries across the globe. Prof. Opoku-Mensah, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for making time for us this afternoon. Right, thank you. So to my third speaker, not to say she's the least amongst the three, Dr. Kate Skinner. She's a reader, and in the Ghanaian context, I understand she's an associate professor, and she's with the Department of African Studies and Anthropology at the University of Birmingham. Her first book, titled The Fruits of Freedom, explored the history of grassroots political activism in the Ghana-Togo borderlands in the era of decolonization. Her second book, Writing the New Nation, was a joint work with Professor Wilson Yayo of UCC. It focused on African-owned and African-language newspapers in the Ghana-Togo borderlands at the time of independence. Now, Kate was a Leverhulme-founded International Academic Research Fellow here at UCC in 2019. During her fellowship, She developed her interest in gender and legal reform in Ghana and gave a public lecture on child maintenance in historical and contemporary perspective. Presently, she's collaborating with Professor Akosua Adomako-Ampofo of the Institute of African Studies in an oral history and filmmaking project that explores gender activism and women's organizing under Ghana's military and single-party regimes. Dr. Skinner, thank you for your time. If you could give us a wave, you're so welcome this afternoon. Thank you so much. So to my participants, these are our speakers for this afternoon. So we're quickly going to dig in. Remember, you actually have that opportunity to ask your questions. You can type in as the presentations go, and then I'll be posing the questions on your behalf. I look forward to a very interesting interaction this afternoon. So with my three speakers, I would want to know your story so far, your journey to this point. How has it been like? And I'm going to start with Professor Abigail Opoku-Mensah. What is your story actually in the world of academia? So let me start with you.
It's a great opportunity to be here and to be part of this discussion. I would want to say that I belong to a family of teachers. Both parents were teachers, but retired now. I happen to marry a husband. And I have seen how growing up, my parents were so committed to their job. I never thought of becoming one, but growing up, it came up that I had to, my parents supported me as well as my husband, and I got into academic. And I must say that I have never, and so far so good for me. Looking at the theme for today's discussion, that is navigating the academia as female scholars. This clearly shows that the journey is not smooth. There are ups and downs that we have to go through and to be recognized as women. And in fact, literature or evidence in literature clearly shows that gender imbalance exists in academia, just as Dr. Gina Odro indicated. Gender imbalance exists in academia. You often see more women number of women entering because things are changing. More women are getting into the labor force, but getting to the top, we are very few. But it's very obvious to note that women, just as men, we are all capable of getting to the top. I have been in academia for 10 years. I have held certain positions and chaired a number of boards and committees. And again, I must say that being a wife with children, throughout this journey, there have been ups and downs. When you come to academia, academia is full of opportunities to organize and also to lead. The question is, how many women get the opportunity to lead? How many women get the opportunity or are able to knock holes through the glass ceiling? And the glass ceiling is a metaphor. There are invisible barriers that we would have to, that prevents us from getting to the top as achievement or our qualifications. Again, when you come to academia, there are three key functions. We have to research, we have to do extension services, and then we have to teach. And these are all demanding roles. Is that there is a fourth component, which most often we are very quiet or silent about it, and that is the family responsibility. To me, I see that as the leaky pipeline in academia, motherhood. But again, I would say motherhood in academia is possible because the family responsibilities comes in several forms. As an academic female scholar, you may be married, you have to take care of a husband. You may have to take care of children. If you don't have children, you may have to be taking care of your elderly parents or other extended family members. And literature clearly shows that women, we spend 3 times more the time when it comes to childcare compared to men. So from the word said go, women, we have to do more compared to men. So how do I navigate? Going back to the moderator's question, how do I navigate through these? The family responsibilities is equally demanding as our teaching, our research and extension services. Or if you take the triple role according to Moses framework, the reproductive role, the productive role, the community changing activities, how do we manage as to get to the top or break or knock holes through the glass ceiling? I remember when I joined the university, my former dean, who happens to be a male, advised that as a young academic, you should have a personal, professional development plan. I had a personal development plan, and I still have, which is guiding me. In this development plan, you indicate how many papers do I want to write as a young scholar within an academic year? How many conferences do you want to? You have to apply for promotion. So the development plan guides you in this line of progression. Both men and women can have personal development plan, but we should know that women, if we get into academic, the family planning also plan when to have children, because when we get pregnant along the way, it sometimes takes us off our work. It's not every pregnancy that is smooth. Some pregnancy, you need to be hospitalized from day one to the last day you deliver. And even after that, sometimes if you are not very well, you need to stay more. So it takes us off our work. By the time you come back, some of your colleagues are way ahead. And these are some of the issues that we have to go through. So having the professional development plan is key, and planning your family life is very key. To be able to balance work and family responsibilities, according to Greenhalgh, he indicated that if you're not able to do that, it creates work and family conflict, and it has its own consequences. So we try to make an attempt and balance it. What do? You get support. You get what we call the social support. And the social support can also come in several. And now we have the new daddy in quote. Men are beginning to understand and they are supporting us at home. So you can get a spousal support, you can get extended family support. And I always say that if you are in the capacity and you can afford, pay for. But there's a caution here. When you get the support, you must play a supervisory role, because if you leave all the work in the hands of a third party, it comes with a lot of consequences, which we don't want to. And I want to say this, my grandmother growing up would say that, Abigail, if you go to school, you get to the top and you feel and you feel at work, you have failed completely, it's equal to zero. So at every stage in time, we have to do more compared to men. I always say that in academia and directly to female scholars, let us try not to be in competition with one another, because competition here puts a lot of pressure on us. We need to stay healthy. We need to be able to stay focused and work. There is no need for competition so far as you have your personal ideal. And that is leading you to the top and knocking holes through the glass ceiling. So competition at all would put unnecessary pressure on you, which we want to avoid. Another thing that I would want to talk about has to do with mentoring. Mentoring is very, very important and is key. University of Cape Coast, Ghana, I happen to have some female scholars who are professors who are my mentors. Aside female scholars who are my mentors, I also have male professors and colleagues who mentor me whenever I need advice in my, I'm not so sure of the next step to take. They are there to advise, and I think that it helps us to be able to navigate through the storms and get to the top. The last thing before I end has to do with networking. you know, when it comes to networking in academia, it's very important when collaboration. Men network differently from women. Women, we have to take a longer time before we network, but men do it easily and they are able to move to the top and support each other. But women, it is a different ball game. So we need to consciously make the attempt. Individuals who are also researching in our areas of expertise and collaborate with them. And I think that when we are able to do that, our works will be seen all over the world and we will be able to break through the glass because of the good work that we are able to do. I would end by saying that I remember my female colleague here, we planned to research, do a paper, and then published it. So we planned that every other week we will meet in our library. So week 1, I get to the library and I call my female friend, who is also, she tells me, Abigail, today I can't do any academic work because my child is sick. The following week, she gets to the library, she calls me and I said, no, I can't come because I'm in the hospital. I need to take care of my child 2 or 3. So clearly you see, you would have the plan, but sometimes you would fail along the way. But I want to say that collectively, when we come together, we work as women, we will be able to knock holes through the glass and excel. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor opoku-mensah. I'm grateful. I picked a few things. One, you said women in academia should not be in competition with themselves, against themselves. You also mentioned the fact that there are invisible blocks that hinder your growth, to get to the top in the world of academia. Also, the fact that you need mentors for your growth, the networking aspects you mentioned, and then the personal development plan. Already, I have noticed a comment from Richard Yao Johnson, who says, wow, I like the professional development plan aspect of your presentation. Thank you. So I'll quickly move to Professor Buswell. You're welcome. I want to know, how has your story been, being a woman in academia in South Africa? How has the journey been so far?
Right. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and to Dr. Yauduro for giving us the opportunity to be here today. So my background is quite a varied background. I was born, in the Indian Ocean region, so not really South Africa. And then my parents moved to East Africa in the 70s, and then in the 1990s, I moved to South Africa. So I've lived in a number of different places, and that in part also influenced my life as an academic, because it allowed me to see that there are possibilities, in different spaces, that that the world is not as closed off to us as we would imagine. And I think it gave me a bit of a head start, because it allowed me to be a little bit more courageous, to be a little bit more confident, I think, than some of the individuals that did not have the opportunity to move around a lot, which is an opportunity that I had. And so what I also think is important is, while you do have a professional development plan, I think it's an important idea or concept. I also like the idea of having a career that basically develops fairly organically. And it develops organically because you actually pursue the thing that you enjoy the most. Some people enter into academia thinking that they have to be teachers their entire lives. I did that for 17 years. I was pretty good at it, but I wanted a little bit more. I wanted something different. And after 17 years of teaching both undergraduate and postgraduate students here in South Africa, I went on to serve in senior management. So I was a dean for 5 years, and now I've taken a new path again, where I'm working full time as a research chair. And the one thing that I think that sustained you know, my academic output in all these years was the fact that I really enjoyed, you know, the anthropological work that I was doing. And I think you, as an academic, you have to choose a subject matter that you're deeply passionate about. If you find out halfway through that you're not really into political studies or sociology or chemistry or whatever it is, you have to do a sort of U-turn and pursue, you know, try to find a subject that you're passionate about, because that will keep the momentum going insofar as your research outputs is concerned. And you will then be more motivated to produce work that is of a high caliber or high quality for high-end journals and publications. So that I think is very important, being passionate about what it is that you're doing. The second thing is, I mean, in the 17 years that I was teaching, I would say that more than 70% of my colleagues were male. And a lot of women find it very difficult to actually work with men. I think that there is a, you know, there's a stigma that is actually attached to that. And you need to know how to work with men without letting them treat you always as a woman. And because we live in such a, you know, a gender segregated and often a gender discriminatory environment, especially here in South Africa, there's a tendency to assume that a woman can only do certain things, or that you're only available at a certain time, that you can only produce a certain quality of work, or that your work will be influenced by the emotionality of your sensitivity as a woman. And I think that one's emotionality and sensitivity are in fact, I think they're assets. They are assets, and they bring such nuance and feeling to our work, which, you know, for a very long time was actually not recognized, but increasingly so, especially in the social sciences, that element of insight, for example, is now recognized. So I think that is important, having passion for your work, having an interest in what it is that you're doing, pursuing with courage, you know, different positions, different ideas, different field sites if you're an anthropologist, and not, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, being willing to go and do work that is innovative, that others are not doing, to work across disciplinary boundaries, not to see yourself as being confined to the discipline that you graduated in, but exploring perhaps, you know, partnerships and collaborations with people who are in a different discipline to you. I also believe that prioritizing is very important if you're a woman academic. And one of the things that tends to happen is that if you live in a fairly conservative, gender conservative society, there's pressure that is put on you to prioritize certain things. So you'll be expected to prioritize your reproductive role above your productive role. You'll be expected to prioritize your household over your academic book or paper or your field research. And it's very difficult to get away from those kind of social pressures. But you as an individual have to make space for yourself. So sometimes, if you want to be organized and you want to be successful in a particular area, let's say your academic work, you're going to have to let other stuff slide, unfortunately. And by that I mean, you know, your household cannot be perfect. Your ironing or whatever it is not going to be perfect. Your cupboards, or, you know, are not going to be, you know, somebody comes into your house and opens your cupboards, they're not going to see like perfection in there. You can strive to achieve that, but it's going to be very exhausting, because you must remember that your male colleagues who are not subject to this kind of pressure are not under the same kind of scrutiny as you are. So it's important to basically to carve out a bit of space for yourself, to prioritize yourself, your well-being, especially your well-being, your physical and your psychological well-being. That's very important, because you can't actually produce and you can't be a successful academic if you are struggling with your psychological and your physical health. As a senior academic, I think one of the most wonderful opportunities that arises when you become a senior academic is exactly as Abigail says, the opportunity to mentor and to support younger scholars, and to also to give them life advice, you know, and to learn from them as well. Because one of the interesting things that happens, you know, as you grow older, is that you know, it's not just a question of gender, but sometimes we ourselves become a little bit more conservative and wary of adventure and wary or worried about doing things that are perhaps a little bit out of the way or out of our comfort zone. And when you work with younger scholars, when you work with different scholars, they open up that sense of adventure and the willingness for you to actually step into a new role or to step into a new working space. What is it like at our university? There is some support for women, not enough. Most of the you know, individuals who are senior academics, research chairs, and so on and so forth are men still. And most of them are in the field of sciences, especially in the area of oceans, which I'm working in. 90% of the marine scientists are male, very few women, and I'm working in an area that is transdisciplinary. So I'm trying to bring social science perspective or anthropology to bear in the field of oceans conservation. And I have to work with people who perhaps do not necessarily have very high regard for the social sciences and the unique perspectives that we can bring to the story of ocean sustainability and conservation. Just to inspire some of the women students that are here. So where I grew up in East Africa, it was a very rural area. We had absolutely nothing there. I mean, I went to school. I was lucky to go to school where I was able to learn English. So it doesn't really matter where you come from. It only really matters where you're going. And the thing is that you just need to have that bit of self-belief. Sometimes it's important to be a little bit naive about that, to naively imagine that you're actually a bit better than what you actually are. And that's fine, because when you submit your papers for review or your book for review, there will be enough critics out there. There are enough people to tell you what's wrong with your work and what needs to be fixed in it and why it's not good enough for, you know, the top end journal. So it's very, very important to surround yourself with people that believe in you and to also cultivate a good, strong sense of self-belief. A final word that I can offer: things are changing very much here in South Africa. There's a lot of emphasis now on gender balance in academia. There's deep study of, you know, how institutional cultures are influencing women, and we're trying to make that, you know, our institutional culture one that provides greater support to women scholars, younger women scholars. But there is still the issue of what I call the missing middle. So women who are in their 30s and their early 40s that have young children who are somehow supposed to magically just continue to produce prolifically, even though they have very young children, or they have teenagers in the house, or they have elderly parents that they must look after. So that aspect or that dynamic is not really, you know, explored or examined or catered for by senior administration. And I know this because I was on the other side of the story as a dean, and I saw it happening to academics. So I think that's an area that really needs to change, that we need to look very closely at the ways in which our own institutional practices influences the possibilities for women academics. Yeah, that's all I'd like to say.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Boswell. I got a few takeaways myself from your presentation. The fact that you should enjoy what you're doing, and you would also, I mean, with your own words said, choose a subject matter you are deeply passionate about. And the fact that working with men and not allowing yourself to be treated as a woman, is also important. You also mentioned the fact that you need to prioritize your physical and psychological well-being in order for you to navigate the academia and then make inroads there. Thank you very much. I would quickly want to say that I would love to have all microphones off if you're not contributing. We're getting a few feedbacks here, so be grateful. If you're not on the floor, please turn off your microphone for us.
Well, thanks very much, Akosa. I think I'd actually like to start by saying how grateful I am to UCC, because I have met really great academics from UCC and really great members of the legal services team. And those individuals at UCC who have really supported me, really encouraged me and helped my career. It was Wilson Yayo, who I knew first at UCC, and then through Wilson I got to know Dora Edubuando, and through Dora I got to know Gina Oduro and Nana Anna Abaka Khan, and all of these people have been really helpful and really supportive to me, and it's made a difference in my career, and I'm really grateful to them. And Dora also, you know, with the level of seniority that she's achieved, you know, I listen to her advice sometimes, and, you know, I respect her achievement. I kind of hesitated to say a lot about myself because I worry a bit that maybe I'm not entirely representative or typical of UK women academics, but since you kind of specifically asked me for my kind of personal story, I'll say a little bit. So like Prof. Opoku-mensah, I'm also from a family of teachers. They were very ambitious for me in school, really wanted me to succeed academically. So partly as a result of that and having very helpful teachers at my own schools, I went to Oxford as an undergraduate. And then I went to Paris for a year after that to do a master's in African history. And in my Oxford experience, I think Oxford has changed a lot since I was a student. But when I was there, I was almost entirely taught by men. I was taught briefly by a very young woman in early modern history. And the person who really stimulated my interest in African history was Megan Vaughan. And she was the only woman who I had significant teaching from when I was an undergraduate. And to be honest, I don't think she ever quite realized how much she'd influenced me. I'd really found her work and her career and her interests very inspiring. And I think that's probably one of the things that made me particularly interested in African history. So after I'd done my MA in Paris, I then ended up at Birmingham Uni for my PhD because of the African studies kind of tradition at Birmingham. And I've been there ever since. I said that I see myself as slightly atypical in the sense that I had my first child when I was 26. And when you look at academic women in the UK, that's a very young age to have a child. And if we have time, I'll say more about the ages at which people have children and the number of academic women who don't have any children. I can say a bit more about that as I go on, but I was a bit atypical in that respect. So I had my first child towards the end of my PhD. Then I did a postdoc, which was funded by the Nuffield Foundation, which I was very grateful for. So my first years being a lecturer were very hard. I was commuting a long way, had two relatively young children. It took me about 8 years to get promotion to senior lecturer. Even though I felt like I was working very hard, I wasn't seeing as rapid progress as colleagues saw. After I became a senior lecturer, it took me about another 5 years to get to reader, which would be equivalent to associate prof in the UCC system. And like I say, actually, over the last 5 years, I've had a lot of engagement with academics in Ghana, mostly at UCC, but more recently also with Akosua Adamako and Pofo at Legon. And actually that engagement has really helped me. It's really supported me. It's really helped me to sustain my interests and do things and have a kind of international experience that I might otherwise have struggled to have. So that's been quite a big influence, I think, in my career. Do we have a little bit of time for me to say something more broadly about the UK HE sector and what we know about women there?
Yes, I just said that I think I can help you with about 4 minutes.
Okay.
If you can quickly do that for me.
All right, so I mean, the first thing I'd like to say about the UK HE sector is that it's absolutely huge. Like we're talking maybe around 160 universities, about 2.3 million students. The student population is actually majority female. when we look at the academic population, that is about 50-50. But when we look at the professoriate, it's only 20 to 25% of professors who are female. So basically, we don't have an issue with female participation, either in higher education as students or as academic staff. But what we do have a problem with is career progression among academic women. And one of the tricky things about the UK sector is that we have several different kinds of universities. I think that probably applies to quite a lot of other countries too. But we have quite a lot of differences in what is valued for promotion in different institutions. And that can make it a bit difficult that if you've invested a lot of time in one particular type of university, you've oriented your career in a way that might not be equally valued in a different kind of university. There's a lot of studies that have looked at women's academic career progression, but there was one in particular that stood out to me, and that was in 2013, a study by Santos and Dang Van Pho, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Now, they crunched a lot of data from the Russell Group universities, and that's the type of university that Birmingham is, where there's quite a lot of emphasis on research and promotion. And they came up with 3 key findings, which I think are probably interesting for comparative purposes. And certainly they map onto my experiences, at least to some extent. So the kind of most general finding was that there was a negative association between being a woman and academic rank. That was the kind of broadest, most general finding, which is not surprising. But then after that, we get some kind of sub-findings and ideas that would prompt us to ask more questions based on qualitative research and individual studies. So basically, the first finding was that in the lower ranks, academics spend more time on teaching and administrative service than they do in the upper ranks. And this pointed to the possibility for women who are overrepresented in the lower ranks of a kind of vicious cycle in which you need to have research to achieve promotion to get into the higher ranks, but you don't have as much time of your working time for research until you get out of the lower ranks. So there's a kind of squeeze point of getting your first promotion. And that certainly maps a lot onto my experience and my observations of how hard it is for women to be able to say no to requests for additional teaching and additional service without incurring a lot of disapproval. So there's that sort of catch-22. And I think that maps a lot also onto age and the question of children. So in this particular study, they actually found that there was a positive association between academic rank and having children, which seems counterintuitive, that having children seems like to map onto being in the higher academic ranks. So they scraped a bit more on that data. And actually what they found was there was a lot of timing going on, that quite a lot of women were deliberately timing children to come after they'd achieved a promotion because they were worried that if they had their children when they were younger, they would not be able to get the time to do the research to get the promotion. And they also observed a really high level of childlessness among academic women. And I was really quite shocked when I read the stats. You know, they were saying that in the general population of England and Wales, about 20% of women at the age of 45 have no children. But in their sample, they were looking at rates around half. So the unusual levels of childlessness among academic women, they considered to be, in a way, quite a worrying study, a worrying finding from their study, because of course, you've always got a multiplicity of personal situations. You've got things that people choose to do, things that they can't control, all kinds of complex factors that come together for different individuals. but they felt that that finding pointed to both the actual difficulties that women experience in balancing family and academic careers, and also the perception that that was the case. So I think I do have some concerns, if you like, about academic women's careers and elements of your personal life and your happiness, which can be quite difficult to keep together. And I would echo what the others have said about support. When you've got supportive colleagues, you've got friends who can really encourage you and value what you do, it can make a lot of difference to being able to cope with the difficulties that you encounter.
So I was asking, before I let you go, I'm wondering, do you think that our cultural backgrounds actually play a role in women in academia trying to make families and also combine their progress in their world of work? Because in the Ghanaian setting, at least we have the extended family system where you'd get other family members coming in to support you in one way or the other, and then allow you to also academically improve yourself and then get to that level you want to get to. But then with your system, from where you're coming from, is it that you lack that? Do you think culture plays a role?
I definitely think it plays a role. I think there's quite a lot of complex variables that go in. Like quite a lot of the men that I work with, especially the younger ones, but possibly to some extent the older ones too, are quite hands-on in their home. So I think you often find academics married to other academics, and there is an awareness in couples of the need to share. I'd hesitate to say that that was entirely universal, and I'd hesitate to say that it always has exactly 50-50 effects, but I think there is a reasonably strong or common element of sharing between husband and wife. I think with extended families it varies a lot. I think it's hard to say, like my own mother helped me a lot, but she could only help me in school holidays because she was still working when my children were young. So she would help me with my kids, but it had to be at times that she wasn't working. I think possibly that idea of bringing one of your parents, like bringing your mother to actually live in your home with you and help you in a more full-time kind of way, I think that's fairly uncommon in the UK context. Maybe having a mother who actually stays with you for quite a long period of time is more common in the Ghana context. But you do see people kind of coming up with all kinds of different arrangements based on their particular circumstances. And a lot of people have said to me that having parents who live nearby and can come and help you regularly is an absolute blessing. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Professor Opoku-Mensah, you struck a chord, and it has actually led to a number of people asking questions in that regard, and you'd be wondering which chord you struck. When you're talking about women not being in competition with themselves, it has led to a number of questions coming up here. People are trying to find out from you how this actually affects the growth of other women. And I'll be coming to you and then you'll be addressing these. But then before I do that, I'll quickly go to Professor Boswell and find out from you. Looking at the history of South Africa, the fact that there is racism, the issue of gender also plays a role. How do women, survive in such a context?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's actually a very important one, given that, because of the apartheid past, here in South Africa, and it's really quite stark, actually. I mean, if you look at the demographics of, women academics in South Africa, in general, the more senior women academics are still, white or European descended women. They are still, the individuals that have greater access to resources. And the majority of, women of color are the ones who are in more junior positions in the society. And now there are efforts by the National Research Foundation, the South African National Research Foundation to ensure that younger, Black women or African women in our country get the opportunity to basically study further, to undertake postgraduate studies, or to be competitors for research grants, to receive collaboration support, networking support, to basically ensure that we have a cohort of younger women of color that are now, able to pursue a career in academia. But for decades, first of all, white men were prioritized under the apartheid, regime. And then, of course, in an attempt in the early 80s, 1980s, in an attempt to basically to democratize, academia, more opportunities were made available to women. But again, because we were still under the apartheid regime, it meant that, it was basically white women then that were basically getting these opportunities. And even today, if you look at the landscape, for example, of senior researchers or research chairs, you will see that there are very, very few Black women research chairs. Where there are women research chairs, it's mostly white women.
Right, thank you very much, Professor Boswell. Let me come back to Professor opoku-mensah, but then I would want our participants to, for those of us who join us, we're looking at women in academia and how they have been navigating their chosen area of work. Professor opoku-mensah, forgive me, I keep calling you Opoku-Agyemang, forgive me. Professor opoku-mensah, Richard Yao Johnson wants to know from you. You struck a chord, and that was what I was talking about, the women being in competition with themselves. And he wants to find out, don't you think that this actually is one of the contributing factors to women not being able to progress in their professions?
Okay, thank you very much. I think for my presentation, when I talk about the competition, I was making reference to not being in competition with other colleagues, and other colleagues here means both male and female. Okay, it's a stereotype because we live to prove it or dispute it. So there are instances that a woman will have that experience and more often will generalize it because of one experience. There are some individuals who would also live and would never encounter any other woman or a woman who makes it very difficult for her. In literature, we get to know that some women make it very difficult for other women to progress or get to the top. And this is termed at what we call the Queen Bee syndrome. The Queen Bee syndrome they grow up and they because of the experiences that they have gone through, very difficult experiences, according to literature, it makes it very difficult for them to hold hands of the younger female academics and bring them to the top. But I'm happy to say that things are changing through platforms like this, and we are making aware of the need for us to work together, and collectively we will be able to break the glass ceiling. We are moving forward and we are making that conscious effort. The Queen Bees make it very difficult, and there are just a few women who turn out to be Queen Bee. So we are promoting and encouraging women to support each other. When you get to the top, you identify those that you can mentor and bring them on board.
Right, thank you. I believe this would also answer the question of from another lady. Let me get this, Akosia Dove. She was also wanted to find out from you if the Queen Bee syndrome that you just spoke about. She's saying that it is difficult to find some of these women in academia to hold the hands of those who are yet, to find their feet, to help them get up there. But then I think you have addressed that, and we'll leave it at that. I would want to take a question from Dr. Enima. Please hold on a bit. Yes. Dr. Inima Ejapong, and I would go back to Dr. Skinner for you to address this for me. What she is saying is she does appreciate the presentation by Professor Mensah, yet she's struck by the extent to which the emphasis is placed on individual cisgender women who desire to raise children to navigate the patriarchal structures of academic institutions. In what ways should institutions cater for cis women who want to have children?
May I actually clarify that question, because I don't think it comes out correctly. First of all, my pronoun, I use they pronouns. And the question I'm actually asking is that in what
Okay,
way—
Dr. Inima is on the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify first that my pronouns are they. And secondly, that the question I'm asking is, I'm really struck by the emphasis placed on individual women, right? So this is what cis women want. And there's a lot of discussion about motherhood, which I understand. However, I would really be interested in hearing what the panelists have to say about institutional change.
Okay.
I got muted.
Right. Dr. Skinner, would you want to take that for me?
Sorry, I just want to add that not just for heterosexual people having children, but in terms of the whole reproductive labor that is happening within academia more generally. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not a lawyer, but I think there's a slight issue in the way our anti-discrimination laws feed into institutional attitudes to equality, diversity, and inclusion. Because the Equality Act in the UK identifies a series of protected characteristics, of which sex is only one. There are many. Having caring responsibilities is not really, I don't think it's something that has special legal protection. And in that sense, I think we see an increasing issue that when people who are not heterosexual women becoming mothers, when they also end up with significant caring responsibilities, either for their own children or for parents or other forms of care and responsibility, they are encountering in similar or not necessarily in exactly the same way, but they are encountering some of the same issues, which historically we've always talked about in terms of heterosexual women becoming mothers. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That I think there is an increasing recognition that it's not only heterosexual women who have who become parents and who have care and responsibilities. But I don't think we've not sufficiently addressed how difficult it is to reconcile caring responsibilities generally with an academic career, with a very long hours culture, with quite a competitive culture, with a career where in lots of areas you kind of need to travel in order to do, in order to build an international profile, and so on and so forth. So I feel like I don't have a 100% answer to your question, but I think, how can I say it? I think there are lots of issues around academic working culture generally, which we think of as being mainly problems for heterosexual women as mothers, but which actually reach all kinds of other groups as well. And we're not really dealing with the root of them, I don't feel. I think we have an increasing emphasis on equality, diversity, and inclusion. We have quite, in some ways, quite strict equality laws, and yet we're not getting to the bottom of that problem.
This one goes to Professor Abigail Opoku-Mensah, and it reads, I am also into teaching and a mother with children. How do I manage to break the glass ceiling you spoke about? Any tips?
Okay, that's a good question. Being a mother and also in academia, I will just share some few tips. I want to say that, first of all, we must acknowledge that there is a glass ceiling. There are barriers, there are unseen barriers that exist. And we need to build a positive belief in our own abilities. Most often women, we feel that we don't have the abilities, we are not capable. But it is important that you have that positive mindset from the beginning, that you have all the abilities to be able to get there. So my dear woman, that is the first one. And the next one that I will talk about is that you should have a plan. The plan, career woman, if you don't have the plan that guides you, you will be swayed toward one side against the other one if you are not careful. So we want you to be consciously aware of the demanding roles of these two areas, okay? So have a plan that works for you. Most often we also lack confidence, so let us have the confidence and be yourself, be yourself. So being a mother here, you mentioned that you were a mother. I would say that motherhood, just as I indicated, to me it's the main leaky pipeline, because it takes a lot of time. So you need to adopt a strategy or typologies that work for you to be able to balance your work and family conflict. And again, I say that because we perform multiple roles, most often female academics, you are always, so try and find out the thing that helps you to keep calm. So Gina is my next door neighbor. She knows that when I come from work, I'm so stressed out. I go straight to my 4 or 5 pots of flowers. I turn the soil upside down, and that keeps me calm. And it helps with you. I also want to advise that you don't give up. That is one thing. When we are knocked by one, we give up, but don't give up. When you have any bad experiences, please don't see yourself as a victim, but say it as an experience any other person, and that you are in to make a change. That is where the mentoring conception comes in your mind as a young female. So getting to the top, you refuse to be a queen bee in the system. And again, learn from your mistakes. Because if you want to knock holes through the glass,
Professor opoku-mensah's line is breaking again.
so believe in yourself, make the conscious effort to break the glass ceiling. And oh, please don't forget the God factor, because God gives us the strength and the direction.
Right, thank you very much. You're still participating in the third webinar series of the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation, CEGRAD of University of Cape Coast. And for today, we're looking at women in academia and how they have navigated their chosen area of profession. Now, Professor Boswell, this question goes to you, and it's coming from Elizabeth Awuku. She says your presentation was a beautiful one. And the question is about identifying what you are passionate about in academia to pursue it. How does one identify what one is passionate about in academia and then pursue it?
Thank you. That's actually a very difficult question to answer, because often the case is that, one sort of has to find what one doesn't like before knowing what one really wants and what you really like. It's a terrible trial and error, exercise, and it can be quite a costly exercise. I'll give you an example. So I served, I was vice dean way back in 2010 of a faculty at a completely different university. And then I thought that, well, perhaps this is where my career is going. Perhaps this is where I can provide the biggest, I can make the most important and useful contribution, which is to be in management and in administration. And I have quite a few colleagues and friends that said, it's very difficult to be part of academic management. It's you have to be a particular kind of person to be in that space, and it can still be quite a patriarchal kind of environment, very male-dominated environment, where they have you know, the work ethos is also very masculine. It doesn't take into account, you know, the fact that you have children. I mean, I have 3 teenage children today. And of course, I mean, I was, you know, I was determined to actually try something completely different. And I mean, it's absolutely perfect to you know, it's perfectly fine to try something that is different. And so I served as a dean for 5 years, and it was the most turbulent 5 years of South African higher education history. This was the time when we had the, I'm sure some of you may have heard of it, where we had the fees must fall protests, which were fairly, you know, in some cases, fairly violent protests for about 2-3 years of those 5 years. We've had quite a lot of problems, for example, with, you know, electricity interruptions. No one's really talked about those kind of things which are particular to our African continent. You know, service delivery protests, a range of external factors, you know, that even if you are deeply motivated and passionate, can basically affect your progress within academia. Added to this, you know, I was also in a situation, like Abigail mentioned earlier on, of being a younger academic in an environment where there's a queen bee. So that was very difficult, because the more enthusiastic and the more, you know, passionate I became about carving out some time for myself as a dean while I'm doing this management work, but still trying to keep a foot, you know, in the disciplinary space, so that I don't lose touch with, you know, theoretical developments and with the development of the subject matter that I'm interested in. I did have this queen bee that made my life psychologically very difficult. And that's how I then knew that actually the fact that I persisted, you know, with the research and the writing and focusing on that particular subject matter, that's how I knew that I was passionate about it. And I think perhaps a less painful way of knowing, you know, how it is that you're passionate about something is to see, you know, when it is that you spend time on an essay or a project without really feeling that time is actually going by. If you're starting to feel that it's really, things are really dragging along, or this paper is just not going anywhere, or the subject matter that you're working with is not something that you don't really care to actually read more about it. In other words, you as an individual, you're not invested in it, and you don't actually really want to learn more. And you're finding that you are wasting your own time, maybe you are procrastinating over that paper or that article, then the chances are whoever's going to read that work, they're going to spot that. It's going to come across that the work is not put together in an incisive, you know, energized way. They're going to pick up that, you know, you don't really care about the work that you are putting before them, because you're not meticulous about your referencing, or you haven't paid attention to the kind of argument that you're putting together. And so you should try and be very aware of your, you know, I spoke about your own psychological and your physical well-being earlier on in the presentation. I think it's very important to be aware of your own sentiments, you know, to be self-aware, you know, of your feelings when you are an academic. And the terrible thing, obviously, about being a female academic is that people tell you, you know, don't pay attention to your feelings. You know, just forge on, you know, get the paper out, you know, get that book proposal done, you know, go and do that field work. But if you feel intuitively, you know, this is not right for me at this particular point in time, or I need to hold back, I need to wait a little bit, I need to read more, I need to collaborate more before I can invest my energies in something, then actually start listening to what your feelings are telling you about, you know, a piece of work. Don't make costly mistakes. Although I personally, and I'm going to end there because I'm taking too much time, I personally believe that we go through certain things for a reason. and that, you know, even all the experiences, for example, that one obtains, you know, in a management position, these are skills and experiences that you can put to good use, you know, in another environment. It's not all wasted.
Right. Thank you very much, ma'am. We're grateful. Dr. Skinner, this one is for you. It's coming from Rosemary, and she's asking, do UK universities have specific policies to support female academics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a slightly tricky one, because if I was representing an institution, I would definitely say yes, that they have invested in things like the Athena Swan Charter. We have a Deputy Pro VC for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. So I think from an institutional perspective, they make investments in certainly in gathering data about the nature of their workforce, their student body, looking for patterns. There's quite a lot of monitoring of data to look for patterns. There's also been leadership programs which are specifically for women as well. So all of these are things that institutions will probably tell you that they invest in to make their workforces more equal, diverse and inclusive. There is a kind of a tax provision when it comes to the childcare issue, that if your university has its own nursery, you can pay nursery fees out of your gross income rather than out of your take-home pay, which basically is like a way in which the tax system kind of helps you with nursery fees. It's not only women who pay nursery fees, you know, you get a variety of practices in couples. You know, sometimes they put all their money together in a single account and pay all their bills jointly. Sometimes they, you know, will say, okay, you pay this bill, I'll pay that bill, and so on. But the fact of that sort of help in the tax system, if you're paying nursery fees, is useful. All of that said, I do have a little bit of skepticism, speaking from a personal perspective rather than an institutional one. I have a little bit of skepticism around leadership training for women, in the sense that I think there's an implication there of a deficit model, that the problem is that women are not natural leaders, or that they kind of lack in the will to be leaders, and therefore leadership training programs are going to fill those deficits. And I have a certain amount of reservation around that kind of approach, because I think it can shift the conversation towards what's lacking in women and away from the structures implicit, and how the implicit structures are actually working in an institutional context. So I'm sitting a bit on the fence here. I would say there is some institutional support for women's careers. From my personal perspective, I think I would probably try to make changes in certain different areas.
Right. Thank you very much. It is still the third webinar series for CEGRAD, UCC, and this one is asking all panelists, how do we network effectively if this appears to be essential for growth in academia? Professor opoku-mensah, would you take that?
Okay. So when we talk of networking is very important when you are in academia. In academia, you are expected to publish. If you don't publish, you perish. And again, we encourage that you identify individuals who are also researching in your area of expertise and do that. But we should know that the way men network is different from the way women network. Women will sit back and make a lot of analysis before we move on to network with an individual. So we had to make that conscious effort. There are steps in how to meet an individual, the first thing to do and what you have to do. There are some instances that you would make the contact with an individual. It depends on the person's personality. If they are not the outgoing types, they may bounce you back and you feel that you don't know how to network, but you don't give up. For instance, when you attend international conferences, this is a very good platform for you to meet individuals who are also researching in your own area of expertise. So what I normally do is that right after the presentations, I move straight to those who presented in my field. You send emails. If you contact about 10 people, you send emails, at least you get about 3-4 people replying. That is where it starts from. And being able to follow up this kind of relationship that you build from conferences. So it's important that we make that conscious effort. For example, after the conferences, international conference or local conferences, and I tell you that meeting Kate and Rose on this platform, I'm going to send a quick email. So the relationship starts from there. And something good will definitely come out from it. But you need to be patient with that. You need to be patient. And in getting or identify individuals, you also need to be very strategic in the selection so that you can benefit at the end of the day.
Right, thank you. I'd love us to wrap up, but then there's this other question that Professor Boswell, you'd have to take this for me. Now, one is asking, there seems to be some fear among women for subjects that involve calculations. Do you think women are afraid of mathematics? That's what someone is asking.
Absolutely not. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's again, I think it's stereotyping that has from a very young age that has directed a lot of young girls in particular to pursuing subjects which appear to be more relational in nature, so into humanities and social sciences and so on. And it's a very tricky question to answer because it also depends on what is happening nationally and culturally. So for example, in certain societies where women's education is not prioritized or where women are undereducated, you might find that there are fewer women that are taking on, subjects such as science and mathematics. In some of those societies, you may also find that families are also fairly gender conservative in perhaps sending their, younger male children off to school and for a longer period of time than they would send their girl children, or expecting them to marry at a young age and to have children at a young age. I mean, I can give, an example from my own family. I grew up in a fairly large family, and I remember at the time when I was going to go off to do my undergraduate studies, not even postgraduate studies, undergraduate studies. I had obtained a bursary or a scholarship to go and pursue undergraduate study. And my father at the time, who was a lovely man, who just said, well, what is going to be the use of this? Because at some point you're going to get married and have children. So you don't necessarily, unlike, Abigail and Kate, who had teachers for parents. My mom stayed at home. She was a homemaker. My father worked. And, his idea was that this is my future is going to be one principally dominated by, getting married and having kids. And although I did get married and I did have children, I also have an academic career. And so those kinds of ideas or philosophies about where women and girls should be also influence whether they are exposed to subjects such as science and mathematics. And because in some countries also science and mathematics are perceived as, prestigious, subjects, subjects that can help you to earn a lot more money, than perhaps being in the social sciences and humanities, the subjects are also prioritized for men and boys.
I think that's how far we can go with today's session. But Dr. Dro, before you come, there's this question that keeps coming up, and I have presently been sent the same question privately. And Janet Boateng wants to know, Professor opoku-mensah, you stirred the pot, so definitely probably you'd have to answer that. She wants to find out, are women our own enemies?
This question is very difficult to answer. I would say that it is a perception. It is a perception that individuals who have had bad experience would conclude and say that. There are some men who had also had very bad experience with other men. But would we say that are men their own enemies? Of course, no. Men and women are not the same. So for me, this question, we are our own enemies. People say it because of the kind of experiences that they've gone through. Some had had wonderful experience with superiors who are females and wouldn't say that. So it's a stereotype, and people are living to either confirm this or to dispute it. I don't know what Kate and Rose will say about this. It's a very difficult question to answer because it depends on an individual's experience, the experience that the person has gone through.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I can see Dr. Skinner nodding. I don't know if you want to quickly add something to it, or you're okay with what Professor opoku-mensah just said.
I think I would add to it. I don't feel that I've experienced it myself, that I've sort of been a victim of a queen bee syndrome. I think generally I've had reasonable amount of support from women around me. That said, I do think the academic profession, it can be very competitive and very individualistic. And I think it's sometimes hard to handle the kind of micro-political dynamics. It's sometimes easy to perceive that people are climbing on your back and getting ahead of you when perhaps that isn't actually their intention. They think they're minding their own business and getting on with their work. You know, there's a real difficulty, I think, in finding ways of being supportive and collaborative in an environment which does have that overall kind of competitive, individualistic, kind of reputation building type ethos. I don't know if I have the answers on how we could improve that, but I would really like to see a kind of kinder and more supportive institutional culture generally. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. At this point, I won't be able to pose any more questions to our speakers. Before I allow Dr. Drew to come in, this is coming from Penelope, and it reads, "You are all incredible women, and it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for hosting, for your speeches, Professors Boswell, Skinner, opoku-mensah, and thank you for your time as well." I'm sure Penelope has just said exactly what I would have said and what Dr. Drew would be saying as well. Doc, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Akosia, and then Penelope, like you just said, you've summed it up. It's so interesting how time flies. And it's like we wish we could continue, but we can't because we have other engagements awaiting us. It's been a very interesting afternoon and a learning experience. Learning has no end. We keep on learning from other experiences, and that's exactly what has happened. It's interesting to note that this afternoon we've had people from different continents and different countries gathered here on our computers and phones. We've had people from the US, UK, from Kenya, from wherever. It's so interesting how this webinar series is taking us, and then maybe networking us and then also mentoring us. So it is an opportunity to network, but also to build our network. We thank CEGRAD for this lead. We are happy to have noticed a few people. We have Professor Jisi here. She was the former rector of the Koforidua University of Technical, is it Koforidua Technical University? We're even thinking of having her as one of the speakers, though she wasn't, but she's with us this afternoon. She stayed through. We've really enjoyed her presence. We are happy to have Dr. Nima from the US University of Cincinnati. We've had people from Kenya. Someone just sent me, they said we are from Kenya. We don't have Kenya resource persons, but we have Kenya participants. So it's been very, very engaging. Listening to us, we realize that there are some threads that cut across all three speakers, our family backgrounds. We can't rule it out in our academic journey. those coming from maybe parents with teaching backgrounds, but those who are coming from parents with no teaching. My mom was a trader. My dad wasn't an academic. I'm also here. I have my own experience to share on a different platform, but it's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. The issue of competition and women being their own enemies also came up, and my response will be a situation of competition. Because whenever there are scarce resources and we are all competing, it can be very intense. And not too long ago, we had a resource person who spoke at our research conference. And he said that the academy is a very competitive institution. So it's something that we should learn. The issue of support system also came up. We heard from individual support system, be it from external family system, be it from partners, be it. But what we need to take away from this discussion is that universities as institutions need to formulate, institutionalize policies that will really support the system if we want families to grow, and the families are a replication of the society. So it isn't about whom you have, because listening to the UK experience where women are drawing away from families or aging and with childbirth, learning from kids is quite interesting, because we've been teaching the concept of freezing our ovaries or eggs because we want to pursue our careers. And you think that it's an abstract concept, but we are learning about it this afternoon. So it's something that we need. Another thing that struck me had to do with leadership support systems or training and deficit model. How does that also resonate with affirmative action policies in the first instance? Considering that we have issues where sometimes we need to bring on board some of these policies. Do we pursue from the deficit model? Is it beyond that? It's also something that is striking that we need to take away with. Another thing, I'm picking the very little things that doesn't matter much. The experience of having a female lecturer. Listening to Kate from the Oxford experience, I was so surprised. When I started teaching in 2011, I had the opportunity of teaching level 100 students. And some of them came to me when they were leaving the university that you were the only lecturer, female lecturer that I experienced in this university, in this 21st century. You were the only female lecturer that I experienced, and I'm leaving the university having been taught by no other woman. So it's something that is happening, and it's not peculiar to Ghana. Even institutions that have developed with huge history, still the female lecturer ratio is very, very low. So when we're talking about experiences of female academics, it's a reality. It's something that happens. We may have 50-50, as you said, in the UK system, but how many are up there as professors? It's something we need to take away with. Rose mentioned the need for us to be passionate about our subjects, be it the calculations, be it the statistics. There is Kafu, who is on this platform this afternoon. She's a statistician. Whenever I see her, I tell her that I respect you so much. I'm a sociologist. I can't manage the calculation, but she's passionate about it, and that is her. So it's about you identifying your subject area, being passionate about it, and going all out to work on it. The issue of networking, mentorship, a whole lot, and also being very, very strategic is also key if you want to navigate the academy and come out successful. Thanks so much, our participants. Thanks so much, our speakers, for opening our eyes to this discourse. We'll continue with our series, continue to propagate our good works, and then we'll be having different topics, different months. It's a monthly series, and every month we have a different topic. Thanks so much. Have a very good afternoon. Thanks our vice dean, thanks our moderator, thanks our support staff, thanks everyone, the ICT staff, and all of you for your very good work. We've enjoyed time with you this afternoon. Have a good evening or morning, wherever you find yourself. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Dro. She is the Director for the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation, CEGRAD of University of Cape Coast. So that's how we wrap up the third session of the webinar series by CEGRAD. For today, we had the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences joining us. That's Professor Augustine Tanley. He was with us as well. And let me extend warmth to our presenters again. Dr. Drew has done that already, but Professor Boswell is asking that Professor opoku-mensah and Dr. Skinner, you drop your emails with Dr. Drew, and the networking just started. It's been a pleasure having you all here. My name is Akosia Chiambiasaki. I look forward to meeting you again in our next session. All the best and enjoy the rest of your day.